Well, you made it. We've come to session 8 of our Methods and Tactics course in the No Man Left Behind self-paced training. I'm David Delk, and I'm here with Charles Cooper, Brett Clemmer, Pat Morley. And congratulations on going this far. And as we look at this session, kind of bringing it all together and reviewing some of the things you've learned, guys, I'm wondering, as these leaders finished this course, is there a truth that you would want to kind of leave them with that would help them as they try to put this into practice?
You know, I would say basically, most importantly, how critical the bait is and keeping the bait fresh. As every great fisherman knows, I mean, the bait is everything. And the way you keep that bait fresh in the process that we're trying to teach you is to keep that wheel moving, that create, capture, sustain of going round and round. And every time you go round and round, the bait is fresh for the new man, but the man that you already have that you're working with. How critical that is, how important that is, and how simple it is.
That's good. You know, I would say, David, that I'd like to say manage your expectations. That it takes a long time to build a ministry, that you can spend 3 to 5 years and not really think that you've gotten anywhere, but at some point, I can promise guys, I can promise teams that stick with it, they're going to come to a point where all of a sudden they look around at the different leaders of the church and they're going to realize that it's their ministry efforts that have discipled those men from maybe not even knowing Christ at all the way now to leading and bringing other people to faith in Christ. But you got to stay the course.
Wow. That's good, Brett.
Well, I guess what I would say is, you know, this is one thing that you can do and know for sure that you're actually doing the will of God. God, our Savior, wants all men to be saved and to come to a knowledge of the truth. And the No Man Left Behind model is a system that's perfectly designed to produce the kinds of men, husbands, and fathers that we all want in our churches. And so we commend it to you, and we thank you for being part of this course.
That's great. Well, Brett Clemmer and our studio audience are going to review now for you the truths that you've learned in the first 7 sessions. But let me just add this. Don't be afraid to start small. Guys, you don't have to take on this whole thing all at once. Just pick the places where you feel like God's calling you to work right now. He's not calling you to do everything for every man, but there are some places where you can make an impact. And so after our session, you're going to have a chance to continue working on your plan and how you're going to actually calendarize that into real next steps in the life of your church. So thanks for being a part of this course. We have prayed for you as we produce this material, and we are here to help you with anything we can do as you move forward in discipling men.
Well, welcome to Session 8 in Course 2, Methods and Tactics, the second part of the No Man Left Behind self-paced training. It's been a great time that we've had in the previous course, Course 1, Foundations, as well as throughout the last 7 sessions of Course 2. What we're going to do in this session is we're going to give you an overview, go back through the last 7 sessions and hit the main points, make sure that we've got those solid. And then we're going to talk about, now what? How do you plan your next steps? How do you take the methods and tactics that you've learned so far and actually put them into practice in your men's discipleship activities in your church? So let's get right to it. In the first session, we talked about casting the vision, and we talked about the language that we use to cast the vision. We want to use strong language that really relates to guys. And we talked about 3 different tools that you would have. The first tool is an external call or challenge. This would include things like a name for the men in your church, a slogan that you might use to call guys, to challenge guys to step up to that next level and be a man in your church, a godly man in your church. And then we talked about an internal purpose or planning statement. We talked about this is the statement that can be long and really detailed, and you're really not going to share it with many people. You're not going to put it in your brochures. It's really for your leadership team, as a tool for your leadership team to determine what will we do, how will we do it, maybe even sometimes determine what we won't do. That's your internal purpose or planning statement. And then the last piece we talked about was your elevator speech. And in your elevator speech, that's your 4 to 5, maybe 6 sentence short version of what is the purpose, what is the vision of men's discipleship in your church? Why is it so important that you would use when you're sitting down and sharing with people, maybe for the first time, your passion for men's discipleship in your church? Maybe one of you might have an insight that you got from the session on casting the vision. Anyone? Mike.
Yeah, when I saw the casting of the vision, I realized that I can use it for many other things besides just the men's ministry. But that call to men to be a challenge, inviting men to be a part of something bigger than they are, which always gives a purpose to a guy. I'm so tired of seeing statistics of how bad we are. Come, now, we're rapists, we're this, we're that. Come and join this small group. I'm tired of that. Let's do something that's bigger than ourselves.
That's good.
And casting the vision is just that kind of thing.
And cast the vision in a positive way of saying, hey, come be a part of this good thing, not, hey, you're so lousy that you need to come and become a better man. That's excellent. Great job, Mike. Thank you. Well, in the next session, we talked about building allies and building leaders. And when we talked about building allies, what we were talking about is not just building the number of men that are participating in our activities, but really increasing the number of men and really women and ministry leaders in the church in general who really get men's discipleship, who understand how important it is, and who want to be supportive of what we're trying to do to reach and disciple men. And the benefit of having allies is that you don't have to sell every event every time. You take your vision, you get your allies really invested in your vision, and then as you present opportunities to help that vision come into being, come to fruition, they're already in. They've already bought into the vision, and so they're already in to what you're doing. The next piece of this, though, is building leaders, and we talked about those unexpected leaders, the guys who are around you that maybe are a little annoying, maybe even at times. They're always sort of taking initiative, or they're inquisitive, always asking why, or maybe they're sort of behind the scenes guys, but you always notice that they're present. They're always doing things. They're always taking responsibility, helping out. And we talked about how do you capture those guys, how do you pursue those guys and get them involved in being as part of the leadership of your men's discipleship efforts. And we used the phrase ART, A-R-T-T, that you set an appointment, you develop a relationship, you establish trust, and then and only then do you start giving those guys tasks to do, A-R-T-T. So maybe one of you has an insight about how this session on building allies and building leaders might be helpful to you in your ministry. Chris.
Brett, what resonated with me in this section was really that message of promoting the vision versus the mistake that's often made of promoting the task over and over, or the event over and over again. And the key part about promoting that vision in that ART acrostic is the relationship.
Right.
We're getting relationship in the task, trying to shove that first, as opposed to building it from that appointment, the relationship part, and then the trust again. There's relationship woven in each area.
Excellent. Great. Thanks, Chris. Then in the third session, we talked about what a disciple looks like in your church, and we used a paradigm or a chart with the head, heart, hands concept. In other words, we said, what do we want men to know? What do we want men to believe, to be passionate about? And then what do we want men to do? And we looked at it in these relational spheres, their relationship with God, their relationship with their family, their relationship with the church, their relationship with the world, and then their relationship with themselves. And when you take the head, heart, hands matrix, when you take that chart, and you come up with maybe 2 or 3 different items in each box, what you end up with is a picture of what a disciple looks like in your church. And that's the answer to our question. If you were to have a man for 5 years, what are the experiences and knowledge and beliefs that you would want him to have, that you would say, okay, we've been successful with this guy. We have helped him move along the continuum. We have helped him become a disciple of Jesus Christ. And the head, heart, hands matrix gives us the necessary piece that we need to do to one of the more powerful exercises that we have in this training, and that is the gap analysis. Because with the head, heart, hands matrix and your men's ministry audit, you can determine of these things that we're trying to establish in our men, where in the church can they do that? Where are the different activities and opportunities that actually accomplish our outcomes that we're trying to bring about for our men? And which ones are we not accomplishing anywhere in the church? And then by doing a gap analysis, by figuring out what outcomes we're not producing yet, then we can figure out, okay, are there some activities in the church that maybe could be tweaked or retooled a little bit to meet those outcomes? And then and only then, if we don't have an activity that currently produces that outcome, if we don't have an activity that we could tweak a little bit to produce that outcome, then and only then might we create a new activity or a new opportunity for men in our church. And so it takes the pressure off of us a little bit to do a gap analysis, because we might find that really we only need to do a couple or 3 things new that really most of the things that we're trying to accomplish, we can accomplish with all of the activities in the church that are already going on. And that's good news for tired and men's leaders who are overburdened with stuff to do. We don't need more stuff to do. We need to do things that will help us bring about the actual outcomes that we're headed towards. Then in the next session, in session 4, we talked about creating momentum by providing value. We looked at the types of men that we have in our church on our spiritual continuum, and we thought about, well, what are the needs that these guys have that we can help meet as the church? If a guy's early in his spiritual walk, for instance, he's looking for buddies. Well, we can meet that need by providing opportunities for him to develop a network of friends, maybe on a softball team in our church. And maybe a guy who's a cultural Christian, he's looking for something a little bit deeper, friends to sort of talk to and bounce things off of. And so maybe we can give that guy some regular activities to get involved in and some guys that he can get to know a little bit better. A biblical Christian, he wants to go a level deeper. He's looking for brothers, guys that can really challenge him and hold him accountable maybe after they've developed a little bit of a relationship. We can give him that opportunity through small groups. And then our leaders, they're looking for men that they can pour their lives into. They're looking for guys that they can mentor and disciple. And so we can help those guys find these guys that are behind them in the spiritual continuum and give them an opportunity to minister to those guys. And so you can take the needs of men and look at it anywhere across the spiritual journey, the wide, deep continuum, and you can figure out how you can meet a guy's needs based on where he's at spiritually, and then use that to draw him into the things that are going on in the church. But just because you can get him in doesn't mean your job is done, right? And that's where the capture step comes in. And we would say that the capture step may be one of the most important parts of the entire cycle. Because once you've got a guy invested and involved and interested, the worst thing you can do is nothing. And so you've got to show men the right next step. Every time they take a step forward to get involved in something, to increase an interaction, to go with you to coffee or come to a men's event, you've got to be ready to show that man what the right next step is going to be. You have to give him a good second gear opportunity, something that's believable, something that's achievable, something that he looks at and goes, that makes sense. That's the next thing for me to do. So that he can just like he's on that conveyor belt, it just sort of moves him on to the next thing without him having to overcome any kind of barrier to make that decision. So we can see how create and capture work in partnership with each other. Creating draws people in, and then capturing captures that momentum and begins to show men what the right next step would be. I'm wondering, does anybody have any examples or an insight as to how the create and capture concept is working or would work in their church? Cameron.
Yes, our church has already created an event for a fall festival where for a small church we bring in thousands of people with a family, children's activities, a car show with like 100 cars, and free food and drinks. So we already have that, but then that's it. Next year we do it again. So one of the things we were talking about and you brought to light is connecting them. So this would be more for the needs Christ type people of just bring them in with some activities with other Christian men, paintball, fishing, and so forth, and then from there figure out how to connect them into the church.
Excellent. So at your festival then you'll show some of these other opportunities for guys to come and, like you said, do the paintball or do the more activity, recreation-oriented activities. And then at those activities then you'll think of another capture step, another next step for those guys to take to channel them into even more, into even deeper relationship with other guys in the church.
Right.
Great job, Cameron. That's fantastic. Great thinking. All right, then, in the sixth session of this course, we talked about reaching men at the heart level. And we say this, we can't say this too often, that Christianity is not about behavior modification, it's about heart transformation. And if our goal is to transform hearts, then we need to speak to men in a way that reaches their hearts. And so we brainstormed some ideas of some different ways to reach men at the heart level. We talked about the power of prayer and music and drama, of testimonies, of service projects, of shared experiences. And when we talked about the fact that women tend to bond face-to-face in shared conversation, whereas men tend to bond shoulder to shoulder in these shared experiences. Guys like to tell stories, don't they? They like to talk about, remember that time when. And so we want to give guys those opportunities to have those stories to tell about the things that they've done with their brothers at church and the stories that they've heard, the ways that touch their heart to draw them deeper into relationship with each other, deeper into relationship with God. I'm wondering, does anybody have any insights that they got from this session on reaching men at the heart level that they're going to use in their church? Willie?
Well, when we talk about reaching men at the heart, I was thinking about how you were saying that it's not about performance. It's about Christ and our life and our relationship in God's Word. Because when we stay in that Word, it helps us to bond together, and it keeps us motivated in what we are trying to do, especially when we're talking about reaching each other by the heart. So I thought that was great.
That's fantastic. So as we bond guys together in relationship, their hearts become joined, and together they can pursue Christ more effectively. That's fantastic. Thank you, Willie. Then in session 7, we talked about the sustain step. This is the last step in the cycle, in one time around the cycle. And we talked about that we sustain momentum with guys by building bridges and by developing relationships. That a lot of times a guy is in church and somebody says, hey, that activity over there, that's a really good thing for you to join. You should go join that. But it's too far. He doesn't see a believable way that he can get from where he is to where he needs to be. And so we need to build bridges. We need to build intermediate steps that help a guy get from that church service to that men's group, or from that service project to that missions trip. How do we set up the steps that guys need so that each step is a believable, achievable step that makes sense to a guy? And how do we do that? One of the main ways that we do that is that we help guys develop relationships with each other. You know, I'll take a bigger risk if I'm doing it with a friend. If you want to set me off by myself, my risk tolerance may be this much. But if I've got a buddy to take that risk with me, my risk tolerance goes way, way up. And so as we develop relationships with guys, it helps us to go alongside of them and help them take bigger steps in their walk, bigger risks in their faith journey. And so building relationships with guys can really help us sustain the change that's happening in their hearts. And so you see this create, capture, sustain cycle. It's not just one set of things. It's not step 1, step 2, step 3. It's a continuous cycle. Once we've gotten a guy into some kind of sustaining activity, now we're going to maybe look for the next step on the next create step in his spiritual journey. And we're going to capture that momentum, and we're going to get him into another sustaining activity. And so as a guy moves on, he may come to your church one time because his wife made him come, or because a buddy said, hey, why don't you come play on our softball team? But here's what you would hope that would happen. That 10 years down the line, a guy is standing on the stage of your church. And he's being ordained as an elder or a deacon in your church. And the pastor looks at him and he says, hey, John, tell us how you came to be such a vital, important member of this church. How you became such a spiritual leader for the people of this church. Tell us how that happened. And he says, well, you know, 10 years ago, my buddy Joe was sitting in the cubicle next to me, and he invited me to come and play on the softball team. And, you know, after that, everything just seemed so natural. You know, he got to know some of the guys on the softball team and went to some men's activities and got involved in a small group and really started enjoying the preaching and, you know, got involved in this ministry with my kids. And, you know, here we are 10 years later. I don't really feel like I feel like I made one decision. I made one decision to come with my buddy to a softball game. And ever since then, it's just seemed so natural. That's what a seamless discipleship process looks like in the life of a man. That's what we want to happen to the men of our church. We want to create a compelling, intentional, seamless process for them to develop a close, intimate relationship with Jesus Christ. That's what we want to do in our churches.
I'd like to congratulate you on completing this No Man Left Behind self-paced training. I hope it's been a wonderful preparation for you as you're thinking about how do we disciple all the men in our church and all the men in our community. And I want to just say how important I believe your role is. One of the things that we found at Man in the Mirror across the country is that everything rises and falls on leadership.
The investment that you guys are making is going to last for eternity. And I can guarantee you this, when you get to maybe 20, 40, 60, who knows how many years down the road, laying there, getting ready to take your last breath, if you were to give the rest of your life to discipling men, I can guarantee you, you're not going to be thinking on your deathbed that I wish I would have done something else. Because this will absolutely be worth it. And one of the things that we like to do to kind of celebrate and commemorate the commitment that you've made is tell you a little story about a very courageous young man.